Okay. Well, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and filminquiry.com. And we breezed right through January, right into February, and there's a lot of big films that are coming out in February. So on today's stream, I thought I'd address some of the films that came out in January. So what do we got on today's stream? Well, we're going to be reviewing Den of Thieves 2, Pantera, which came out earlier this month, but is now available to watch at home, so you'll be able to watch that at home. Also, what came out last weekend is Dogman, the latest animated film from DreamWorks, another adaptation of one of the works from the Captain Underpants author. And I'll be talking about Section 31, the first Star Trek film that we've had in, wow, if you don't, I mean, it's technically a TV special, but this is technically one of the first Star Trek films to come out in about 9 years, and it's actually more of an abortive pilot, but I'll get into that. So I'll cover all that, and I'll also cover the upcoming Oscars, because the nominations were announced last month. So a lot of ground to cover here. So there's going to be a lot more early reviews. I'm going to try to cover the Oscars in a stream. Especially since I found out, I think they are going to be streaming on Hulu at the same time, so I might be able to do a live watch at the same time, so we'll try that. But yeah, if you would like, I know all these reviews are a little bit late here, but usually we get early reviews. I did actually get a lot of earlier reviews in the For Your Consideration season, specifically the Looney Tunes film, which is actually coming out this month. There's an early review of that. You can check it on the channel. So if you want to see informed on all that, be sure to like this video and subscribe to keep up to date on the latest movies. All right, spiel over. Let's get to, well, we might as well get to, like, the top-performing box office film of the last weekend, Dogman. Okay. So let me get all my notes up here and get some water, and then we'll get to talking about Dogman. And the air has been really thick, and I'm going to try to get through as best I can. I have to go a little bit slower. I'm a little bit more animated usually when I do these, but it's a lot colder this week, so a bit thicker in the throat. Okay, so here we go with Dogman in 3, 2, 1. So Dogman is the latest film from DreamWorks. And for being another film, like Captain Underpants, based on a similar type of kids book, I'm sure that Dogman is going to get immediate comparisons to DreamWorks' adaptation of Captain Underpants and his first epic movie, which I loved. I loved the creativity and just the experimentation and the sly humor and the cleverness that it evoked from the books, which I will admit I am a little bit more familiar with the Captain Underpants books than I am with the Dogman books. So I'm sure, the immediate comparison is going to be, is Dogman as good as the Captain Underpants movie? And if you want a simple answer, the answer is no, but at the same time, I don't think it's an entirely bad film. I just think this is very much a different film that has different priorities and a different style. And specifically, I hate to do this, but I feel like there is a little bit more of a cutoff here in terms of the audience that it's going to be appealing to. Because with Captain Underpants, there were some genuinely hilarious moments that I even as a parent, but even as an adult, I laughed a lot. I found it very clever. It was very fun, and I loved that they experimented with different 2D styles and the flip motion that they used, and using sock puppets at one point. Just all these little creative touches that I thought were just beautiful. Dogman is a little bit more simplistic in that it never really ventures outside of its kind of flat 2D style. It still has that kind of scribbly nature of misspelling words and just making up all sorts of weird ideas and inventions, and just kind of going with that kind of childish mentality. And it kind of sticks there, and on one level, that is very, for the younger audience, I think that's great, because I don't think there's going to be a moment here where the younger kids are going to have jokes that go over their heads. So no, it feels like these jokes are at just the right level that I think kids who have read the books are probably really going to love the film on that level. And I think I think a big part of that is just the manic nature of Dogman itself, because like within the first few minutes we're quickly introduced to Dogman and his cop partner, who they try to stop Petey, the evil cat here, voiced by Pete Davidson, from wrecking up the city, and they end up getting hurt in the line of work, and they end up having their bodies fused together, where the policeman Greg gets his face roughed up, and the dog gets his body roughed up, so they put the dog's head on the cop's body, and they just kind of go with it, and you don't question it much, and you just get into this new hero of Dogman that's kind of like a fusion of both of them. And I think that's kind of a smart call, and having I think rushing through it really quick with like the manic nature, I would say it's a little bit annoying, if not for the fact that if you did slow down, you would actually start questioning more aspects of identity and kind of body horror aspects that come with it, which they do a little bit of like a winking at the camera before they start the surgery, and then they just kind of like go with the flow with it. And I think that works out best for it, because you don't want to slow down too much to think about this scenario, because then it gets a little too dark here. I will say, though, that for the first act, that mostly just focuses on Dogman getting used to his new role, and clashing with the police chief, voiced by Lil Ray Howery, who's mostly just like blustering the whole time. I think a little of that goes a long way. Like, it's fast paced, and there's a little bit of like cleverness, but in kind of like a smile worthy, this feels like something a kid would come up sort of way. So in the same way that I felt like Captain Underpants was all about like these two clever kids coming up with a weird comic book idea, this is pretty much just, that weird comic book idea, and it's saddled there. Now for the first act, it's manic. It's all over the place. It's very fast paced. But like, and I think that, again, I think the pacing here prevented me from getting bored with the film or questioning its darker aspects. But a little of that went a long way, and it's like, okay, there's some cleverness here, it's fast-paced, it's got some decent slapstick here and there, but I'm really not digging on where, I really need more of like a story to go with here. And thankfully, by the second act, it does kind of ground itself a little bit more, where you do start to care a little bit more about the characters. In particular, with the cat Petey, voiced by Pete Davidson, he decides to clone himself, but the clone of himself ends up being as a kind of like pint-sized kid version, and then so Petey has this little, innocent kid following him around, asking him all these questions about why he's evil, why he decided to pursue this life of crime, and just having this sweet dynamic between the two of them. Which I thought, okay, like that's pretty cute. They could build on something there, and the film, it kind of builds on it and it kind of doesn't, because there is a bit of a payoff where Petey learns to see something more within the world through like the eyes of this child, which you could kind of guess was coming, but there isn't much of a build up to that point. It just kind of like arrives inexplicably, where like, the film realizes you need to care about these characters a little bit more and give a little bit more something to them. And I think that works best with Petey, as opposed to like to Dogman, because Dogman seems like he just wants to find a place in this world and find people he connects with. And he kind of does through Petey's clone, more or less, and kind of like, learns to let go of the past and, just keep going on with like his police work and doing what's right and, saving the day without hurting anybody. But of course, that makes Petey a little bit more sympathetic. So there are some more villains thrown into the mix, like Petey's father, who's voiced by Stephen Root, who's just like a cranky kind of evil. And then you have the more over-the-top, cartoonish, Saturday morning cartoon villain angle, with the evil fish, voiced by Ricky Gervais, who's a telekinetic cyber fish who turns the buildings of the city into monsters that Dogman and Petey have to end up stopping. So it's a very simplistic story, but I think that's okay for kids. And it does have a decent message, I think, by the end of it. Even if it doesn't really work out more towards that point. Like, because at one point, Petey brings up how he is evil, because the world is cruel and cynical, and like, there's pollution, and there's nothing much to look forward to in this world, and it just like, and just the world itself has made him such a cynical and hopeless and nihilistic person. And the problem is, this colorful city within like this childish landscape doesn't really set that up. It just kind of feels like that's all in Petey's head, where it doesn't really feel like a major problem or something that you sympathize with them as much. I think it's one of those aspects where for adults who are more, familiar with our current landscape and how cynical the world has become, it will be relatable on that level. But I think for there might be some a little bit older kids who might question well, they didn't really set this world up to look like to make sure that it would form someone like Petey. It just felt like he was just cartoonishly evil, and just did bad for the fun of it, instead of that being a product of his generational trauma and his dire straits. So they kind of fumbled the ball in that area. But where the film, I think, does succeed is just in its energy and pacing, which I have said, but I really have to stress that because if you pay attention to all the subplots, they don't really pay off that much. There is a developing romance between the police chief and the reporter Sarah Hadoff, voiced by Ilsa Fisher, and they really don't have any romance. So for the younger kids, if you're worried that there's going to be kissing and romance, don't worry. This love affair is only kind of declared outright once the police chief just says oh, I'm secretly in love with you, and says this very loudly 2 or 3 times throughout, and the joke is just that he has to proclaim his feelings rather than display them, and that's pretty much how the rest of the film goes. And so I'm kind of, as an adult critic, I'm kind of forced into this spot of where I have to recognize that this is going to be built for much younger kids. They're going to love the cartoonish charm, the misspelled letters Super Cop and all that, and all the weird inventions and the scribbly drawings and the cute innocence and the manic slapstick and all that. Kids are going to love it on that angle. But as for their parents, I think they might get a little bit bored and a little bit confused by how it just goes from incredible manic slapstick all over the place Saturday morning cartoon craziness to a grounding of Petey and Dogman meeting each other on the same level, where those two aspects really don't connect. And I don't quite want to say okay, it's only for kids, or be a dismissive adult saying, well, as an adult I can't quite recommend it. So I am kind of right down the middle here. I am in this spot where I'm just okay, there's some cleverness here and there, but the story really doesn't pay off, but the pacing's okay, and I think there's enough imagination and cleverness that I think kids will really dig on it. But outside of that, it's an okay animated film. Compared to what happened with Captain Underpants, it's not as good. But that being said, it's still a fun film. I think a lot of families are going to enjoy it. But if I'm being honest, mostly the kids are going to enjoy Dogman. So yeah, Dogman is not a bad film. It's not as great as Captain Underpants. It's definitely not as clever or experimental with its animation. But for young kids, I think it's clever enough that they'll enjoy it on that level. So Dogman should be playing in theaters everywhere right now, and I think it'll be there for a bit. Just because I think it was top of the charts, wasn't it? I have to imagine it was, because there wasn't really much of any competition for it that weekend. Oh yeah, it cleaned house. Dogman ended up with 36 million, just behind Companion with 9 million. So yeah. Yeah, there no competition, so Dogman wins by default. Not a huge opening, but it's good. So it'll be around. I hope I didn't sound too dismissive of that too, because I think for young kids, it will be good. All right. So let's go. Where's the next one? Okay, let's cover Den of Thieves 2. Okay. So let me get my notes up here. Okay. Alright, so here we go with Den of Thieves 2, Pantera, in 3, 2, 1. So Den of Thieves 2, Pantera, is a sequel where, you know, how do I put this? Well, when I first watched the first Den of Thieves film, I thought it was okay. I didn't really dig as much on the characters, but I did admire the intricacies that it put into this heist and the detail that it put into its action sequences. So the original Den of Thieves was very much a film where I was a fan of the technicalities more than I was of like the characters and the story. I found it kind of like very very routine for like cops and robbers type stuff, which is kind of just like middle of the road thriller, but the action and the heist aspects I really loved. And with Den of Thieves 2 Pantera, I'm a little bit conflicted because there is more character here. But it's not expanded as much as it could be, and there is still more intricacy and complexity to this heist that's pulled off, but the action does still leave a lot more to be desired. So there's definitely more ambition, I think, within Pantera to be better than Den of Thieves 1, but I was so frustrated with this film because like it had all these moments and it never quite built up to something more than just being like a standard thriller. So like I was very much on the fence, but it was just such a frustrating film. So like the whole deal here is that you have the two main characters here returning of Gerard Butler as Nicholas O'Brien and O'Shea Jackson Jr. as Donnie Wilson, who is back as a criminal in another gang for a big heist. Now, the two of them actually end up working together, which I think is kind of like a good dynamic here. So, like, Nick goes undercover and realizes that maybe I should go with these guys because he feels like he's going to get more out of the criminal world than he would by working with law enforcement. And Donnie is just trying to clear his name because he's gotten into some big trouble with some Italian mobsters and needs this heist to go off. So they both have ulterior motives, but for getting the job done of trying to swipe this like jewel from like this impenetrable safe. That is ultimately what brings them together. So you have a good foundation set up here for exploring these characters. And to the film's credit, there are some good scenes between them. In particular, I liked the setup for like this one scene where like Nick and Donnie, they're partying with their heist friends, but then they take off for a midnight snack, and at that point they start revealing more about their history and their character, and they're just hanging out with each other. And that's that was probably my favorite scene in the film, but it's not really it's not really a great scene. It feels like, Donnie's revealing his past and then Nick reveals his past, but it just feels like they're kind of like passively going into their backstories here rather than just hanging out and connecting, which is what that scene was built for. So you have all these scenes that are built up like that, which they could be great, and there are a few good moments between them, but somehow the character chemistry never takes off in this film. It feels like there are so many moments that start and then just stop too quickly. Like at one point, the leader of this new heist operation in Europe is Giovanna, played by Even Ahmad. And I thought she had an interesting look, and I loved her like the intricate way she assembles this heist. And it felt like there might be some romantic tension between Nick and Giovanna here, and like they do build it up to like have a scene where it feels like they're getting a little bit more close and sexual with each other, and then it's immediately shot down by like one of like the jealous heist members, and it's like, okay, is more going to be built up with this? And it's like, no, it's not really. And I thought like, that there might be more moments for Donnie, because like I really admire how O'Shea Jackson actually, because the heist taking place in France, he actually does a pretty good job speaking some French here, where I was kind of curious to see how much more he would kind of like blend in and try to like work his way around this heist, but unfortunately we didn't get too many moments like that. The only moments that I feel like really do pay off here are just the scenes of the heist, because they've planned this out to a very intricate nature. They plan it out during a football match. They plan to go in when the cameras are switching at just the right moment, when they're switching out the guards, and they have to like time it just perfectly, and just There was some admiration there with just like how effectively it's set up here. Like there are a few hiccups here and there, and Nick worries about whether or not he's gonna have to kill someone in line of duty when he really doesn't want to because he's working undercover. And yeah, the heist itself is actually pretty good. It's on just like an exciting, thrilling level. It's fun to watch. But then after that, we get this car chase where there is like a shootout between these cars, and they're going uphill. They're driving up a mountain. They're shooting at each other, and cars are like falling off the cliff. And the staging, like the setup to that, like the way I'm making it sound here, it sounds like really cool and fast paced, and a lot of like high octane action here. But unfortunately, it never quite hit for me. Like there are some nice shots here and there, but like almost like it almost feels like they're trying too hard to preserve just the right shots here. Like at one point, there's a scene where like a car gets shot up and goes over a cliff. And rather than getting a little bit more of like a close-up, or we get to see the car topple over, or follow it along the road, we get like a long shot from a distance where we just kind of like watch the car just go over, and it's like it's very underwhelming, especially after like those intense like shootouts that they have here and there, where it's just like there's so many hills and valleys with that action scene where, compared to like the shootout in the first film where they were running through traffic and going through alleyways and just taking cover, and people are getting shot up and running and dashing, in between buildings and stuff like that. That was incredibly shot. I love the sound design of that. I love how exciting it was. So, comparing like that to this car chase, I prefer the first film much more on that action angle. And the whole story itself just feels like it's setting up for another series of films here. The way it just kind of has like, these characters, they get caught, but they're not really caught. It's just kind of like one of those like, oh, I'll get you next time, you criminals. And it feels like a lot of setup here and not much of a payoff for the characters themselves. It just feels like the heist itself, it was the highlight here, and all the moments of character drama that are set up, which I'm not faulting, writer director Christian Gustad for, he returned from the first film here. I'm not faulting him for trying to take these big swings here. I just think, if he strikes out, I got to admit it. And there are a lot of moments with this character drama where it never quite lived up to building up the chemistry, especially between the two leads. There are some moments between the other heist members where they do kind of connect a little bit over different types of music, which I thought was cute. I thought, okay, that's a nice scene. I wish we got more of those scenes, because that would have made me, care about this group a little bit more, outside of, just them wanting to get the money and wanting to, clear their names and just, find some safety. And it felt like there should be something more there. It felt like there should be a grander thematic connection between Nick and Donnie, where they should be able to see eye to eye more than just this heist itself. But it almost feels like the film never quite takes off with that relationship. It feels like it's just going to be built up in the third film, which I don't know if they'll make. I mean, if they do, I would be curious to see it, because I like the effort that was put in to making me care more about Butler and Jackson in this type of film. It's just unfortunate that I didn't care as much for them here, because there's never really a moment for that character chemistry to take off. Like when they're not talking about their woes and their where they came from, they spend all their time talking about the heist and the operation and interrogating people for information and just finding a way inside to the vault, and just focusing so much on the job that it never really gives room for that character chemistry to bubble up the way that in a typical heist film you would care about these types of characters. But because this operation has to proceed so smoothly, it never really feels like it becomes more of a human story. It's almost like, it felt more like a video game where, it's more about, just clearing the mission and just choosing the most intelligent people for the job and, correcting any faults that might happen. And that mostly happens throughout the film, where it's just, a heist going off pretty damn well. Without many hiccups or, character flaws. But at the same time, it's just like, those flaws would actually make the heist more interesting. And so the end result here is a heist that looks nice and plays nice, but you don't really care as much about the characters trying to get out of this situation. So I was very much on the fence. I do admire the assembly here. I love the intricacy, but the action was a bit underwhelming, and the character moments just never took off. That Pantera ends up being, a Den of Thieves sequel that takes some risks, but unfortunately they don't quite pay off as well as the heist itself. So, Den of Thieves 2 Pantera is now available to watch on home video. Hey, Scorin, how's it going? Let's see. I haven't seen many movies this month outside of George Romero's Resident Evil. That documentary, yes, I got to get around to that. And Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. Yeah, January is a bit, not to quote that, no booze movement, but very dry. And I think it's mostly just because there was a lot of holdovers from for the Oscar nomination. So, because like people are just starting to see Better Man, and Brutalist was opening up wider. Like a lot of films that people are catching up on. Even like films that people missed are reopening, like Sing Sing, and I think Anora might be opening back up again. So yeah, it's Oscar catch up time. But yeah. Next on my list is Hard Eyes and Lovers. Yeah, we did have a screening for Hard Eyes. I did miss it though. I am going to try to catch it. I will be seeing Love Hurts this week though. So I got that coming up, and I do. It's going to be busy in the next week because like after today I've got what I got Love Hurts. I've got Paddington Peru. I've got The Monkey, and I've got Captain America: Brave New World. So yeah, it's like a dry January. It was like a dry January, and it's going to be a busy February immediately. So yeah, I'm just hitting the ground running. So that's why I'm catching up on the January films here. All right. So yeah, that's why I'm going to get through these and then talk about the Oscar nominations as well, because I'm sure some people are picking up, just starting to get around to watching those as well. Okay, let me get my notes up here for Star Trek Section 31. And let's see, where are they here? Here it is. Okay. Yeah, like, you don't have to worry. There wasn't, especially like if you're someone like me who's like seen all like the For Your Consideration movies, there isn't a lot this month. There's some, but I didn't catch Wolfman though. I do got to catch up on Wolfman. So, all right. So here we go with Section 31 in 3, 2, 1. So Star Trek Section 31 is a Star Trek movie that plays like an abortive pilot, because that very much does seem to be the case here of this spin-off to Star Trek Discovery for the character of Philippa Georgiou, who appeared in Star Trek Discovery a few times, and here she's just kind of she's reprised by Michelle Yeoh, but she's placed in this kind of Dirty Dozen heist type of situation, which just doesn't really quite feel like Star Trek. Because I know that like a lot of fans will like use this excuse for like some lesser entries in a franchise of like how they'll say this doesn't feel like the Star Trek I knew, but I really can't stress this enough, and I don't think I'm alone in this, but Section 31 does not feel like the Star Trek I know, because Star Trek I always saw as being a little bit hopeful for the future while still addressing topical elements of our time, where it skates this realm between being utopian but also like reflective of our current climate. And by comparison, Section 31 just feels like kind of junk. It feels like Star Trek made for people who really didn't understand Star Trek's vision, or they just got annoyed that it became more utopian and wanted to be more open to other people, and they just wanted to see pew pew lasers in a big action sequence. Because like, not to reduce it too much, but I feel like it's like for people who preferred like the Star Trek movies, where they never really appreciated more of like the thematic elements that came with Star Trek, and they just wanted to see starships zooming around, shooting at each other, and different alien races battling each other, more akin to like Star Wars, because this very much does feel like a Star Wars type of story. So, like, you have Michelle Yeoh playing Georgia, running a nightclub, who gets contacted by Section 31, which you don't know is more or less kind of like the CIA of Starfleet, where they get engaged with, like, missions they really don't want to be involved with, that are very, like, morally dubious. And if you thought that this type of film or abortive pilot would address some of those, like, moral concerns about how willing these people are to risk their lives for a dangerous mission with questionable motives, you'd be wrong. And it's mostly because there isn't really much chemistry between the characters here. Like, you have a Section 31 agent, Alok, played by Omari Hardwick, and it would seem like, he connects the most with Georgia, and it feels like there should be a little bit more chemistry between them. But there isn't much. It's mostly just him informing her of their mission, and like they're just kind of, intertwined and are just, co-workers and nothing more. Not to mention the other characters here. Like, you have a Quasi, who's played by Sam Richardson as a kind of a shape-shifting type of character. You have Zeph, played by Robert Kaczynski, who is a Section 31 agent who has like kind of like a mech suit. And I find it funny though how like he clearly has like a little bit of like an English accent, and yet he doesn't recognize like certain and he uses like English words, but he doesn't recognize certain like Earth references, which is kind of odd. I don't know why that bothered me. And maybe it's just because like the rest of like the dialogue and the story was so boring and sort of questioning aspects like that. Other characters you have here is like Rachel Garrett, who is gonna potentially become a Starfleet captain. And it felt like she would be like the most questioning of this mission she's wrapped up in, but she's rarely given much of a moment to shine here. And then who else do we have here? Like we have what's his name? Fuzz, who is apparently this nanite type of being that has hijacked a Vulcan body, and he's just annoying. Like, I know, like, the joke is, like, here's, like, this Vulcan who acts silly and ridiculous and is kind of like the comic relief character, but a little this guy goes a long way, and I just got so tired of his antics the more that this went on. Now, there is a little bit of an attempt here to make you care a little bit more about Georgia, as they introduce like the character of San, played by James Hiroki Lau, who is this former lover who apparently Yo's character had to betray and force into servitude in order to like rise up within like the Terran Empire of her own dimension. Now, you would think there might be like some like attraction there, but it does feel like this was kind of like a rushed story for how like we don't spend a lot of time getting to learn the motives of San, and it was mostly just like revenge here, because like the overall plot is just it's a boring stop like this doomsday device plot, in which like the film is diced up into like three different stories here. So you have the first story where Michelle Yeoh meets like the entire Section 31 Dirty Dozen gang, and they have to hijack this device from this scrupulous client, and then it ends up with like a shootout and a mysterious person who has taken it. The second entry is them being trapped on a planet where there's a murder mystery, and they have to figure out who among them is a mole and who's betraying them. And the third one is them trying to catch up with the Doomsday device, and it's mostly just action with just like fist fights and shootouts and starship chases and launching the Doomsday device and trying to save the universe. And there's really not enough time given between these characters to give them any character chemistry where you care about any of them, where you hope that they'll survive or save this dimension, especially since this is an entirely separate dimension from everything else that's going on in Star Trek. And for being within Section 31, it's meant to be a secretive organization, so So it's like, here's a dimension I don't really know that much about or care about, with a special division of Starfleet that I really don't care about, with characters I especially don't care about. So, and it's like, why should I care about any of this? Why should I care about their ideals they're fighting for? Why should I care about Michelle Yeoh's character, having regrets about rising up in the Terran Empire, especially since she's doing nothing much to undo that damage, and it's just kind of like going with the flow of like her sinister nature. I have heard that apparently Michelle Yeoh wanted this type of project so that they could build their character up to be a little bit more of like an inspiring hero. And I find it fascinating how within like Star Trek Discovery, it felt like they were building her character up to that point, but then it just kind of feels like she fell back into the life of crime and just kind of more or less exists there throughout the entire Section 31 movie, possibly, to set up more for in a future film or TV series. And it doesn't work. Like, there's so little to care about here. The action is just, whatever. There's hardly any thematic themes to pick up on here that resonate the way that the better Star Trek stories do. It just feels like Star Trek junk made by someone who never really understood Star Trek and just wanted it to be, who basically wanted to make Star Wars, because it plays more like a ho-hum Star Wars story, a band of rebels who, go against, what's lawfully right and trying to save the universe and, trying to act quirky the whole time while, not really having like any like thematic, it's mostly just about like the pew pew lasers the whole time. I just didn't really care about it. So yeah, Section 31, I think the best thing I can say about this film is that for Star Trek fans, it is going to bring them all together. Because for a while, there used to be this debate about what was the worst Star Trek film. Was it Star Trek 5? Because, it's like, oh, does God need a starship? Was it Star Trek 3? Because it's a little bit boring? Was it Insurrection because of the morally questioning nature? Was it Nemesis because of the weird plot about, the Romulans and a clone of Picard? Was it the J.J. Abrams ones because they relied too much on action, and Into Darkness was just repeating The Wrath of Khan? Well, here, I think we can put the debate to bed. I think most Star Trek fans can agree that the worst Star Trek film is Section 31, which very much plays like a TV series that was cut off before it could go any further, and I think Paramount probably made the right call in doing that. So yeah, Section 31 is one of the worst Star Trek films, and hopefully we can move on from there, because I really love Lower Decks, and I'm looking forward to more of Strange New Worlds. I love those entries in Star Trek, and, hopefully we can move on from here. Hopefully we can, realize, yes, like, Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds, that worked. Section 31 didn't. So let's not do that again. Alright, so Section 31 is currently playing on Paramount Plus if you'd like to subject yourself to it. I personally wouldn't. You don't really have to. It takes place in an alternative dimension with, a secretive organization we never really learned too much about, so yeah. Even if you're a big Trek fan who'll see everything, you can skip it. Alright, reading a little bit more from Scorn here. Any thoughts on the Fantastic Four teaser? I love the look. I love the cast they got here. I love the way that Ben Grimm looks. I love how we only got a tease of Galactus. I think it's a very good teaser. I think, leaning more into that 1960s angle, it's going to make it feel like a more refreshing Marvel film instead of just having, trying to, fit like the typical mold. Because I think that's what Marvel Studios has to do at this point. They have to branch out, not just like other heroes, but different types of films. And I think going for that kind of like retro futurism within Fantastic Four, I think is going to be a very good idea. I don't know if it's going to be a good film. It might falter with how they try to wrap it in with like the rest of the MCU. But, and that could just be like, that might not even be a problem. So it remains to be seen. But yeah, the teaser as is looks great. it looks wonderful. It looks bright and colorful, and like there's room for chemistry there with the characters. I love how we just first see them cooking. It's like that's all good setup. There's a lot of promise here. I also feel like there might be expectations too high for that film, just because we've had 3 or 4, well, technically we've had technically 4 Fantastic Four films, and they've all been terrible. So, well, no, wait, technically, yeah, it was 3. It was 3. Yeah, there's, was it 3? No, wait, it was 4. What am I thinking? Yeah, because we got two from Fox. We got the Miles Teller one, and then we got the Roger Corman one from the '90s. So, yeah, I mean the bar is low, so I think it. You're right to be excited for it. I'm kind of excited for it because I've enjoyed the Fantastic Four comics more than I have enjoyed any of the movies or any of the cartoons, for that matter. The cartoons were just like abysmal. Like, I kind of enjoy some aspects of the '90s cartoon, but but there's some weird moments in the '90s one. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like the '60s, '70s aesthetic look to it. Yeah, it's very much '60s. I think with like the promotional art and the way that Marvel set it up there. Yeah, with but they did the little what's it like, what do they say? It was like Fantastivision or something like that. And then styling Marvel Studios, the little like Cinerama logo. That's cute little '60s stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping it'll be good. I'm cautious about what's gonna happen with Captain America, but Fantastic Four at least looks fresh. It looks like it has a lot of promise. So yeah. What else was I gonna do? Oh yeah, I was gonna briefly talk about the Oscar nominations here. So, not going to dig into this too much, just going to give like some brief thoughts on it here. So, in terms of like the Best Picture nominations, there's a lot of great surprises here. I was happy that Anora made it in. Anora was my favorite film of last year. I'm also really excited that the Substance got in. You normally see horror films get this far, so that's a big win for horror fans. Now, of course, the the Green Book of the group here is Emilia Perez, and this is, and I say it's very much like the Green Book movie here because it's definitely the weakest film. It's definitely a film meant to appeal to white liberals who feel like this is like saying something about minorities and being progressive, even though it's really not. When you look at it and you actually listen to trans people on this issue, it's not a very good representation, of transgender people, especially during a year where we had much better films than Emilia Perez. I found like the musical just meandering. It was melodramatic. There was a huge tonal shift throughout that never really worked, and it just meandered all over the place and never really felt like it was living up to its ambitions as a narco opera, especially for being a French-made narco opera. It never really worked, and yeah, it sucks so bad when you compare it to films like The People's Joker or what else, or Will and Harper or T Blockers. You have so many other films that are much better at represent. I would take any of those films over Emilia Perez. I would love it if they swapped it out with The People's Joker. That film should have gone much further. But yeah, outside of I would be fine with any of the nominations winning except Emilia Perez, because like the other ones you have here, like Brutalist, I absolutely loved. I think that's going to be the one up there. Yeah, I think it's between that and Emilia Perez for which ones are going to win there. I love that. Conclave, I kind of expected to get in there. Doom Part 2, I kind of expected to be in there. I'm Still Here, I thought was a great international edition. It feels like every year we kind of have to get one in there. But also like Nickel Boys, I love being in there. And Wicked, is like, Wicked felt obligatory. That's one of those like the big films that are going to get in there, but like probably doesn't have a shot at winning. Let's see, Scorn said, The Substance was wild. How has it made me squirm more than Terrifier 3? I think it's because, I can answer that for you. Well, it's because The Substance taps into something much more, shocking about identity amid all like the body horror and the gore. Whereas Terrifier 3, it's just like, the Terrifier movies just numb you after a while. Like, there's only so many times you can see people get chopped up, diced up, have salt thrown in their wounds, get their heads blown off, get their skin torn off, get limbs chopped off. I think there's only so many times you can see that before it just becomes kind of boring. And I think that's been my biggest problem with the Terrifier films. It's like, okay, yeah, there's lots of gore, but if you're going to keep going with it, I think, kind of got to mix it up a little, give a little bit more creativity here. Make it so that you get, it stings, like you said, like you squirm more within the substance. Because, yeah, you do stick with this character and her identity crisis and having this hatred of her body and, feeling that anxiety that comes with, mutating and not abiding by the rules and just, living up to beauty standards. Yeah, it's horrifying. It is absolutely shocking in a way that just goes beyond the visceral, so that's exactly why Substance deserves to be nominated. Let's see. With Best Director, again, happy that Honora's here. I do think, though, it'll probably go to Brady Corbet for The Brutalist. Complete Unknown probably won't get in there. Emilia Perez, I hope it won't. And again, Coralie Fargate for The Substance. Would be really cool. I would love it if The Substance was like the dark horse here and took everything. That'd make the night wild. As for Best Actor, I think it's pretty much just going to go to Adrien Brody here, because Adrien Brody for The Brutalist. The others are Timothy Chalamet, good performance. I don't know if it'll go that far. Coleman Domingo Sing Sing, loved him in this. Not sure if it has enough traction to get that far. Ray Fiennes for Conclave, expected, but I don't think he'll win. And Sebastian Stan, kind of expected, probably will not win. Best Actress, what do you got? Cynthia Erivo for Wicked. I feel like Wicked's going to get, for like the bigger nominations, it's not going to win much of anything. And then for all the technical aspects, it's going to like clean house. Let's see. Carlos Sevilla Gaston for Emilia Perez is definitely not going to win given the controversy that's happened recently. What else we got? Mikey Madsen, I'm kind of pulling for Honora. I really hope she wins. Demi Moore, I think, might actually have a shot here for winning for The Substance. And then Fernanda Torres for I'm Still Here would also be a nice surprise. But I think a more likely surprise would be Demi Moore. Let's see here. Wish Robert Eggers would get more Oscars. Yeah. I know some people are a little bit polarized on Nosferatu, but I love it. I've really dug what Eggers has done. And at least this film did get in within a few nominations here. So let me go through a few more here. Let's see. We got Best Supporting Actor. We have Yuri Borisov for Honora, which I thought was kind of a great breakout role for him. I don't think he has any chance of winning, but I'm glad he got nominated. I think the real competition here is going to be between these three of Kieran Culkin for Real Pain, Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown, and Guy Pearce for The Brutalist. They all just slip into those roles so perfectly. But it's really tough in that category. I think it might come down to Pearce and Culkin, and I'm leaning a little bit more towards Pearce, I think. Then there's like Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice, which I think is much better. I think Strong does much better than Stan in The Apprentice. But I don't know. I don't think he's going to be winning in that one. Just because the film doesn't have enough traction anywhere else here. Which honestly kind of surprised me. I was very like lukewarm on The Apprentice, so I'm surprised to see it get so far here. Best Supporting Actress. We got Monica Barbaro for A Complete Unknown, Ariana Grande for Wicked, Felicity Jones for The Brutalist, Isabella Rossellini for Conclave, and Zoe Saldana for Emilia Perez. I hate to say it, but I think Zoe Saldana is probably going to win just based on their traction there. Although I would love to see Felicity Jones win for The Brutalist. I would say it, given her history, that Isabella Rossellini would win for Conclave, but she's in it so briefly. I don't think she has any chance of winning there. Just because I think some people might remind themselves that Rossellini was in that film. Best original screenplay, we got Honora, The Brutalist, Real Pain, September 5th, and The Substance. I think Brutalist is going to clear that one easily. Would be nice for Nora. It would be cool with The Substance, but it's probably going to be Brutalist. Best adapted screenplay, Complete Unknown, Conclave, Amelia Parez, Nickel Boys, and Sing Sing. A little bit tough. I would like to see Nickel Boys win there, and it might have a shot, but I got this sinking feeling in my stomach. It's probably going to be Amelia Parez. Maybe. Who knows? Conclave, I'm a little bit up in the air in this one. Sing Sing, I think, would be the good underdog to win in that category. All right, let's see. Best animated feature, we got Flow, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Wallace and the Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, and The Wild Robot. I think it's really down to Flow and The Wild Robot here. I think both of them have a good shot at winning. I think it's really going to come down to how willing voters are going to pay attention to just like the stuff that their kids are going to watch. Because ideally, Flow is the better film here that should win over The Wild Robot. Even though I'm kind of like neck and neck between them. I think they're both very good films. Personally, I love Memoir of a Snail, but that's such an underdog. I doubt it's going to win. I don't really think Inside Out 2 is going to win. Even knowing the history of the voters, I think it's probably it's going to be between The Wild Robot and Flow. And if I had to say a safe bet, I would probably say The Wild Robot. Best international feature, Amelia Parez, The Girl with the Needle, I'm Still Here, and The Seed of the Sacred Fig. I would personally say it's between The Girl with the Needle and The Seed of the Sacred Fig, although it would be nice to see Flow, an animated film, win in this category. Sadly, I think it's mostly just going to come down between Amelia Parez and I'm Still Here, just because those have much more traction here than all the other films here. So sadly, what's going to come down to. For the best documentary, I'm going to hold off on commenting on this, just because I haven't seen Porcelain War yet. I have seen No Other Land, Black Box Diaries, Sugarcane, and Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which I'm surprised that got it, because that was my favorite documentary of last year, of the ones I saw, and I thought for sure there's no way that's going to get nominated, because I love that film for its energy, but it's mostly just, taking archive footage and typography and using music of that era to create this very like lavish display of how the UN effed up everything going on within like the Republic of Congo, which it's a fascinating story, and I love the way it's told. But yeah, personally, I would kind of pull for that film in this category, but I haven't seen Porcelain War. I've heard mixed things about it, but I would say, based on the traction, I think a good bet would be Sugarcane. I think Sugarcane has a good shot. Best documentary short film. I have only seen two of these. I've only seen it was Incident and The Only Girl in the Orchestra, which is on Netflix right now. But I have not seen Instrument of a Beating Heart, I Am Ready, and Death by Numbers. I have not seen those yet. Or no, did I see? No, wait. Incident was the Bill Morrison one. Yeah, I did see that one. So yeah. Best live action film. Again, another one I will abstain from because I've only seen one of these, unfortunately. Best animated short film. I was gonna try to cover this because I was so close. I've seen all of these except for Beautiful Men, which I've heard is really good and I think might be a big contender here. I have seen the others though, and I will say, based on all the ones I saw here, I think probably my favorite might be In the Shadow of the Cypress. This animated film from Iran, which does a great job using its visuals to communicate PTSD in the form of two people connecting over a whale. So it's a pretty damn good film, and I kind of root for it. But again, I have to finish up all that. So let's get back to the films I have seen. Original score: Brutalist, Conclave, Amelia Parez, Wicked, and The Wild Robot. A little bit of a tough one. I don't want Parez to win. I don't think it will here. I think it might be between. I think it might be between The Brutalist and The Wild Robot, and I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards The Brutalist. Best original song, we have El Mal from Emilia Parez, The Journey from the 688, which I'm surprised that film got in. Like a Bird from Sing Sing. Mi Camino from Emilia Parez, and Never Too Late from Elton John. Based on the fact there's two films here, it's probably going to be Emilia Parez. I don't really care which one wins. Best sound, we have A Complete Unknown, Doom Part 2, Emilia Parez, Wicked, and The Wild Robot. I'm pulling for Doom Part 2 just because I love the way it got me into that world. Best production design, Brutalist, Conclave, Doom Part 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. Would be nice to see Nosferatu get a nomination here, but just everything that was assembled within Dune Part 2, the way they made that world came alive, I love that. So I'm kind of pulling more for that, but I think it might be between Dune and The Brutalist on that front. Best cinematography, this is probably the toughest one. The Brutalist, Dune Part 2, Emilia Parez, Maria, and Nosferatu. I'm fairly confident Emilia Parez is not going to take this one home. I think it's probably going to be between Nosferatu and The Brutalist, just because they're amazingly shot. And I would say the safer bet is probably The Brutalist, but I'd like to see Nosferatu in something. Because I don't think it has a shot in this next category. Best makeup and hairstyling, A Different Man, Emilia Parez, Nosferatu, The Substance, and Wicked. I think it's probably going to go to Wicked. I think that's kind of an easy one. I think that the dark horse might be The Substance for taking that home, which arguably I would kind of say it probably should, but I think Wicked's probably going to take that home. This one, this is probably the easiest one, the lock of the night. You can predict immediately. Best costume design, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Gladiator 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. It's going to Wicked. I don't think we have to debate it here. Best film editing, Anora, The Brutalist, Conclave, Emilia Parez, and Wicked. And I'm kind of hoping more for Anora. Although I think it's more of an underdog. I don't think it has a shot. I think it's between The Brutalist and Conclave, and I think it's probably going to end up going to The Brutalist, just because I think it might clear a few. And lastly, we have Best Visual Effects, and this is kind of, more of an exciting one because a lot more commercial films can get in through here. So we got Alien Romulus, Better Man, Dune Part 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Wicked. I think Dune Part 2 kind of has a big shot at winning this one. A little tough. I mean, I think some of the voters might have confused Better Man with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes just because they're both the monkey movies. But yeah, Dune Part 2, the way it got you into that world, I love the visuals. I love the way they set up the sandworms and the storms and the starships coming in. All beautiful stuff. Wonderful. So I think Dune Part 2 has a big shot at winning in that category. So yeah. So those are all the nominations, and we will hear about the winners on March 2nd. So next month. So, and I think they're going to be broadcast on, they are, I think, going to be broadcast on Hulu, which I don't think they were last year. So I'm actually going to try to cover them. Well, I'll try to host a live stream through here where I'll have a window up on the side and we'll watch the Oscars together. I've been wanting to do that for a while, and I think it might be time to do that. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of the films I reviewed on today's stream. I reviewed Den of Thieves 2, Pantera. It takes some bigger swings with its characters, and it still has a nice heist element, but it doesn't quite live up to making me care a little bit more about the characters, and its action wasn't quite as good as the first film, so a little bit of an underwhelming sequel. I reviewed Dogman, the latest film from DreamWorks, which has a lot of energy and creativity within its childish animation. It matches the style of the books, but unfortunately it's probably not going to appeal to as many parents as the Captain Underpants movie did. So I think kids are going to enjoy this a lot more than their parents. Not that the parents won't find anything to like in it. I'm just saying it's not as engaging as Captain Underpants. And finally reviewed Star Trek Section 31, a spin-off Star Trek film that tries to give Michelle Yeoh more to do and unfortunately wastes her in a Star Trek story that doesn't feel like Star Trek or understand what Star Trek was all about. So it's definitely the weakest Star Trek film. So not a lot to recommend this week, but I would say if you need to see something, go watch Dogman. I kind of enjoyed it just for its energy alone. And I would say, even if even though I was like a little bit on the fence here, I would say if you do enjoy crime and heist films, Den of Thieves 2 is still worth watching just for how just the assembly alone, I think, is admirable. I don't think its characters work, but the heist itself is really pretty fun to watch. So I will try to be streaming next week here with. I actually wrote down what we're going to be covering in the next week here. So next week I'll be covering Love Hurts, an action comedy starring Ke Huy Quan. I'll be covering Paddington in Peru, the third Paddington film, starring the voice of Ben Whishaw and starring Antonio Banderas. I'll review The Monkey, a new horror film by Oz Perkins based on the Stephen King story, and Captain America: Brave New World, starring Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford. So, if you want to check out the reviews, the written reviews of all the films I reviewed on today's stream, you can find them on my website at movieswithmark.com. You can also check out my Patreon, which I have listed in the description of this video, in which I am finishing up my book on the history of Saturday morning cartoons. That book is done. I've said it's coming for a while. I finished writing it. Now I'm just wrapping up editing it, and then I got to assemble it. The book is going to be done. All the patrons on there are going to get a copy of that book, and I'll be announcing my next movie book project coming up after that novel gets out. I wanted to announce it here, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse here. Got to focus on getting this one done and then move on to the next one. So yeah, if you want to stay up to date on the latest movie reviews, because with the exception of Love Hurts, I think everything that I'm going to be reviewing next week is going to be early reviews. So if you want to stay tuned and want to figure out if The Monkey's any good, if it lives up to the original story, or if the new Captain America film actually turns out to be a good or bad Marvel film, be sure to like this video so you remember who told you, and subscribe to be informed on the latest movies. So yeah, I will see you all next week. I can feel my voice going, so yeah. Have a good one, everybody.